Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Antunes, Festival Director for Spark. Welcome to today's webinar on Warrior Nun, which I'm super excited about. I am now going to turn it over to the embassy team, who's going to give us this amazing presentation. Take it away, guys.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Blackburn, and I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you get a preview of everything. Okay, here we go. So, yeah, my name is Mike Blackburn. I'm the visual effects supervisor at the embassy. Welcome to this presentation on the embassy's work on the Netflix show Warrior Nun. This presentation is going to be 45 minutes and is geared towards a general visual effects audience. We're going to talk about how we completed the show with around 700 shots and around 30 artists total. I've been with the company since 2006. I've been around for most of the major projects here, from commercials and films, TV work, Iron Man, all that stuff. And I personally got my start working with Lightwave on all the old spaceship shows like, Stargate and Andromeda. So I come from sort of a generalist background, and I've been at the embassy since. I'm going to pass this off to Paul and Nick and Danielle for some quick introductions, and then I'll talk a little bit about the embassy and then about Warrior Nun itself. So, Paul?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Copeland. I'm the asset supervisor and CG supervisor at the embassy. I started off my career doing a bit of graphic design and web design, and I got a taste for 3D animation on some of those early projects, and I decided I wanted to get into visual effects. And I've been with the embassy ever since 2006, so a long time, just like Mike. I've worn lots of different hats at the embassy over the years. We always joke about how the owner of the company changes my title depending on the project, but the one I usually go with is asset supervisor. Early on, when the embassy was a lot smaller, I did lots of different generalist tasks, but my main focus has always been kind of the early pipeline stuff like modeling, rigging, animation, things like that. In the last few years, I've also taken on the role of being on-set supervisor and as well as CG supervisor. So lots of exciting stuff going on. And I'll let Nick take it away from there.
Hey everyone, my name's Nick Whiteley. I'm comp soup at the embassy. I joined the embassy about 2 years ago, having worked at some of the larger studios, Framestore, CineSite in the UK, and MPC in Vancouver. I started my career around about 2004 in a small design studio in the UK as audio and video editor. But I soon moved to London thereafter to get a foot in the door at Framestore, where I eventually started as a runner, worked through render wrangling, data ops, writer prep, and then it's comp. But I worked on numerous blockbuster films throughout my career, big studios, and I saw the job opportunity at the embassy open up, and I jumped at the chance to come and work at a smaller studio. And I find that the close knit and talented team is a really exciting environment to work in, and I'm really proud of the achievement of Warrior Nun and the comp team that we have.
Say hi, Danielle.
Hi, I'm the producer over at the embassy. I too started out in graphic design and marketing, worked at advertising agencies, got recruited to a small animation studio that's no longer, it's called Pork and Beans. Moved on to Atomic and doing episodic kid shows and animation for many years. And then transitioned through IMAX in Toronto and different visual effects studios in film, Image Engine and Method, MPC and ILM, all the big ones as well. But I had done a small contract at the embassy during that, and when there was the opportunity to come back as the producer, I again also jumped at the chance. We have a really close team here. We get to be involved in production of film from start to end, and film and television, so it's quite diverse. It's a good opportunity for every discipline, but also for generalists and things like that. So as well as being a producer, we're also involved in the marketing and PR and overlapping with HR and general operations. So we get to kind of do all the things and wear all the hats. And that's it.
Cool. I apologize if I'm a little quiet. Our setup here is, pretty good, but it seems like we're having some technical issues. So I'm going to try to speak up, but I will forget, and then I'll get quieter and quieter, and somebody will remind me. So, yeah, here we go. Introduction of the embassy. Embassy's been around since 2002. We started off doing commercial work mostly, and we've done a bunch of pretty sort of big impact commercials where we did, the Citroen dancing robot, BMW, all CG stuff with cars on aircraft carriers. After sort of a bunch of our commercial work, we got into doing feature films. And the big one being sort of Iron Man was our first. And Paul and I were both here for Iron Man. And it was a really good experience working with Marvel, working on sort of the first Marvel Cinematic Universe film and the first Iron Man suit. So it was kind of a bunch of cool stuff that we got to have our hands in. Embassy continues to do commercial work, lots of good stuff, vehicles and lots of big virtual sets. Work for Disney and Marvel. We've done some toy advertising like this with Star Wars content. There's our friend Mark 1, Mark 3 suit, or Mark 7. Paul, I don't remember which red suit this was in Iron Man 3. Who knows? Anyway,
I don't remember offhand.
No, they're all very similar. We've had our hands in the Hunger Games, more pretty cool TV stuff. This is an all CG frame. And so the embassy has been working on all this stuff. We also do a lot of commercial work, and we also do full production. We will go film commercials, we'll go direct them, and then we'll go do all the visual effects and finish them. Which gives us a really strong core team that we keep. We sort of maintain a really strong level of artists between all these commercial projects, because many of them only last, sometimes they'll be 3 weeks long, sometimes they'll be 6 weeks long, sometimes 8 weeks. And that's not really enough time to sort of bring up the team and then get rid of them all again. We have to keep a really strong level of generalists because every commercial can be a different thing. When we started working with Netflix, we got to work on Lost in Space, and we built the Resolute spaceship, which is a major set and almost a character in Lost in Space. And we got to really bring sort of a really high level of work from our feature film experience and our feature film pipeline, but also with our sort of commercial talent to TV. And we finished it all in 4K. It all looked great on screen. And I think Netflix had a really good experience working with us. That sort of led into us working on Warrior Nun. A year or two later, the showrunner of Warrior Nun, named Simon Barry, working with RDF, Reality Distortion Field. And they are, Danielle, they're a production company, or what is their...
Yeah, production company.
Yeah, okay. So they had the Warrior Nun property, which was, let me see, next slide. Warrior Nun. Boom, look at that. I can drive a computer. So they had the rights to this property of this Arctic Press published sort of manga style nun, and she would go on adventures and fight the conspiracies and use the magic. And they were adapting this for either feature film or television, and it turned into a Netflix show. Let me make sure I'm on track here. So they picked it up. They thought it would have this really good sort of a little bit of humor, sort of urban fantasy style show. And Simon introduced the idea of a sort of reluctant hero in this world as a way to sort of introduce it to the viewers, where the recipient of the magic artifact in the show had to have this moment where she rejected having to be part of this, and then come to terms with it and go help all the other warrior nuns do warrior nun things. Really cool concept for a show. We got involved with it. The owner of the president of the embassy already had an existing relationship with Simon Barry. And so between working with Netflix and Simon, it all kind of came together the right way. And we became the sole vendor for the show, which was really cool, which meant that and let me see what's next in my super slick presentation here. All right, you can see we've practiced this many times. Yeah, so we became the sole vendor. And what that meant was that from concept art all the way through all the visual effects planning and script breakdowns, all the way through filming, being on set, any on-set work, to getting the plates and working with making sure the plates came in the format we wanted, and then working on the shots, getting it all approved, and then delivering it back. We got to sort of wrangle and dictate the entire pipeline, and that was a great experience, and it was really great to sort of have the whole show. One of the biggest things is that a part of that is also the concept work for the creatures. Big part of that is that when we were planning this, we looked at our pipeline, and our pipeline was already a Linux-based feature film pipeline. We maintain a database of versions of everything, so all the shots can be rebuilt with updates. We use Maya for animation and scene layouts and cameras. We do all of our lighting, look dev, and effects work in Houdini. And then we either render with Mantra or Redshift. And so we were planning on using the GPU renderer Redshift for Warrior Nun for really quick iterations. And we didn't really have to change too much about our pipeline. We got a few more GPU render nodes. We bought a bit more storage. And basically we were just sort of planning around how to manage 700 shots of, warrior nuns doing cool magic stuff and having glowing swords and phasing. There's a lot of like almost teleportation effects in the show. So other than sort of our automation and making some strong choices for which effects were going to be in 2D and which effects were going to be in 3D to make sure we could kind of keep the pace, we were kind of ready to go with the show. And we started our concept work in October of 2018. And I believe we got first plates after Paul took a trip to Spain to go film things it was like July or August 2019. And then we wrapped the show the next year in April or May. So then I'll let Paul take over and have a quick chat about his experience on the shoot. And
we were going to talk a little bit about in the pre-production with the 4K proxy mode.
You are correct,
right?
Nick. Thank you for
Take it away, Nick.
And hit that up first, and then Paul will talk. Go.
No, when we were discussing, this presentation, I felt it was important to talk about the proxy mode and how we overcame it. And working in 4K, we knew was going to be a challenge with the volume of shots, like coming through such a small facility. So we knew from the start that we're going to have to work in proxy in some way. The trouble is, I'd never really seen it work at other studios how we thought we wanted it to work. And, it usually involved rendering separate proxies or just working in Nuke's proxy modes, which, caused other problems. We wanted the workflow to be seamless. We wanted the CG department to be able to render in whatever resolution they wanted. And for the comp artist not to notice or worry. So we didn't want already 2K renders to be further down res to 1K, and we didn't want to render multiple proxies. So eventually we figured it out, and an artist could choose to be in proxy mode in Nuke or not, and still be able to work seamlessly with either 2K or 4K renders or anything in between. So the artist involvement was kept to a minimum, and this without doubt, I think, enabled us to get through the 700 shots in such a short amount of time with a relatively small crew.
Yeah, that was an important part of getting ready for the show, and that was something that we'd taken after working on Lost in Space as a a different point to improve. And I'm glad that we kind of solved it well for this show.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Paul, you're up.
Yeah. So, as far as production goes, I was actually very fortunate to be able to go to Spain during pre-production and some of the first block of filming. It was a really great opportunity to meet everyone involved in the production and assist with planning out sequences that we were going to be working on for the next few months. And I was able to like liaise with art department people to make sure we were getting all the data we needed. And all in all, it was a great opportunity to kind of establish relationships with everybody on the production side. Along with capturing reference data for the team back in Vancouver, we had to make sure that all the sequences were filmed with the correct passes so that we had what we needed to create successful shots for the effects we were going to be doing, like phasing and portals that were going to be featured throughout the season. As Mike is flipping through here, like you see some of these beautiful locations. By shooting in Spain, we just had access to these incredible locations. The fact that we got to shoot there made it so we didn't have to do too much set extension work. There wasn't too much set dressing to be done in post or anything. Everything just came across in the actual photography. The beauty of the Spanish architecture and the grand churches were really a perfect backdrop for the theme of the show. One technique I always try and do when we're on set as well is photogrammetry. And it's not a new technology, but it's extremely valuable reference that can be captured relatively quickly. You can use it to help line up camera tracks or as modeling reference. Here's a good example of that. We've used it for elements in matte paintings to fill background elements in, to swap environments for a different time of day. And it's not always possible to get great images on a busy film set, but I find that even a few select images can get you enough, to be a big help once you get into shot work, to know exactly where things were located in relation to the camera and in relation to other parts of the scene.
How long did you have to tell these guys to hold still for this?
Yeah, they had to pause. Wasn't too long, but they did their best.
Yeah,
it turned out good enough to get some usage out of it for sure.
No, that's super cool for lining up cameras. That's great.
Yeah, it's a very valuable thing for sure. Another thing we had is a stand-in actor. So early on, we made the decision to have a stunt performer wearing a gray suit in any shots where the actors had to directly interact with a Tarrasque, and that really helped to make sure the actors were kind of looking in the right place at the right time, and also to help the DP frame up shots so we can take into account the height of the monster and everything, because as filming gets going, it's easy for people to forget that there's a massive demon in the room and carry on with what they're doing. Also, there's some more shots of our guy. We also, cool. One of the other assets besides creatures we had to do was Adriel. We had to do a digital double for one of the main characters, Adriel. And we knew he was going to be fighting the Tarrasque, and we needed the flexibility of having a digital character so we can do dangerous stunts that a human couldn't be doing. And so we had him scanned in Europe, and all the data sent back to Vancouver, and got him ready and able to be put into shots. So all in all, it was a great experience in Spain to get everything ramped up for the beginning of the show.
Cool. All right. And then I think you're going to talk about once you got back and we had, digital double data and all of your collected set photogrammetry photos and everything. And we had concept work going. There was a couple creatures we had to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, 1 second. Yeah. So working on the creatures is definitely a highlight for me. It was awesome. Cool. Demon creatures, super fun work to be on. The two creatures in the season were the Wraiths, an ethereal ghost-like creature that Mike's got here. And they have a red mist that kind of traveled around with them in the shots that was kind of a precursor before you actually saw them. And then the other main character in the show was called a Tarrasque. It's a big hulking demon creature, this guy here, that can enter the human world for brief periods of time. And to realize these characters, we worked with a concept artist, Carlos Fuente, who's been designing terrifying creatures for Hollywood for decades on all kinds of features. So it was really great to work with him, and he was a perfect fit really to capture the tone that the showrunner was going for.
Paul, show everybody your shirt.
There you go.
Look, it's
Everybody's got
it's the head of the
like
creature.
Team Warrior Nun,
All
yeah,
right.
head of the. Yeah, so we went back and forth with Simon and the showrunner and Netflix, refining the design, figuring out details of the face, and did lots of rounds, and eventually ended up with the designs you're looking here. And so, while I was in Spain, I was actually able to start picking up the digital sculpt of the Trask. There was still work to be done, and they had some questions and about the look of the nose and some other features in the face. And so the fact that I was in Spain and already started on the design meant that I could be sculpting and show the showrunner directly, and that kind of direct feedback really helped speed up the final design process. And so yeah, once we got the design sorted out, I finished up the model, and then we moved it into a look dev stage, and Kenny Polonsky, our lead look dev guy on the Trask, set to the task of making our Trask look awesome. Oh yeah, here's a great 3D print that we actually did from the model. Our one of our animators, Wesley, printed and painted that thing, and it's amazing.
It's pretty cool. And now I think the showrunner has one too. They were pretty excited about this 3D print we did.
Yeah. Yeah, once the final design, one of the story points actually that needed to come up was that the Trask was made from divinium, a fictional metal in the show. And so we had to come up with a look that was kind of metallic, but also still looks like it could be on a dynamic, battling creature. And I think we landed on a good compromise of that for sure. Another idea the showrunner wanted to explore is that the Trask came from hell, obviously. And so there's an extreme temperature difference with our reality. And he wanted to see a visual representation of that. So we explored using like a pass of burning embers that kind of constantly emit for him as he's kind of interacting with our atmosphere. And I think it turned out really good to give him a nice demonic look for sure.
He came wrapped in like a set of Houdini embers for every animation update. And he had to come with all of his smoke and ashes and burning things.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, both creatures had their challenges. I think the Wraith and the Red Mist in particular, this is the head of the Wraith, which you don't really ever get to see full on because he's always cloaked and kind of hidden. But yeah, there was a lot of questions with the Red Mist. Like this one in particular is a frame before he's turned into volumes and everything. But yeah, it's how is this guy going to move? Is the smoke going to interact with the real world? Is light going to affect it in the real world? Like how much of the demon would be visible? And in the end, I think we came up with a good balance of ghost-like but still recognizable at the right moments and shots, and came up with something very menacing and creepy that fits well into the lore of the show. So
yeah, he ended up being a sort of volume-based thing, but driven by these sort of harder bone structures underneath, and a bit of a cloth sim to sort of help generate motion for all this stuff. Ghosts themselves aren't really necessarily a big feature at the embassy, but we have done our fair share of magic-like odd weapon effects and things, and all these weird weapons on District 9 and on Elysium, lightning guns and air trails and all every weird source of kind of flashing purple cores and explosions and things. So having to deal with this ghost character, once we picked sort of a way to implement it, it carried on nicely through the show, and we managed to get a look that they were pretty happy with, as far as just a sense of structure underneath this flowing ghost-like vapor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, like you said, Mike and Paul too, is we had that relationship with RDF and the showrunner in the beginning, and we were responsible for the concept as well as many other things for the show. So it was a bit of a unique situation, not just being a vendor, but being a partner. And with a lot of our work, we get to do that. We get to do that in the commercial world for sure as well, and it really helps drive that creative from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a Wraith dying. Bye, Wraith.
with a divinium dagger.
Yeah.
With a divinium dagger. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only way to do it.
All right, and then Nick, I think you're going to talk about
So yeah,
a bit more magic.
yeah, I'll talk about the magic and everything else that we were taking care of in comp. So yeah, a lot of the effects and the magic, the majority of it was actually driven from comp, which is great for a comp team. A lot of look dev, a lot of challenges, a big chance to be creative. And we had a great team here at the embassy. At one point, I think we had 12 artists, maybe 13, which is a lot of artists for a company like us. And we had lots of different effects like halo glowing, like a subsurface glow on the various garments, blue glowing swords that had to not look like lightsabers. We had phosphorus blasts, magic blasts, and then phasing, which covered a few different types of effect, like portals and demons breaking in through into our dimension and getting sucked back out of our dimension. So when it came to phasing, when we read the script initially, we thought it was most likely going to be a 2D effect, and we knew the magic of the show needed to be able to be look dev and iterated on quite quickly, as it was such an integral part of the show's lore, and we knew it was going to be continued across 10 seasons, 10 episodes. Sorry, getting ahead of myself.
Maybe
10
seasons.
seasons.
I mean, it might be. But this very quickly grew into something, much bigger, I think, than we expected, and something that would traditionally be done in 3D and Houdini. So, this phasing effect, it encompassed a lot of different things, and we knew we wanted to create this ripple or disturbance effect in a way that felt alive and organic. And as it turned out, earlier on in the project, and in fact, even probably before the project started, one of our comp artists, Riley Gray, had been experimenting with the point renderer by Mads Hagbarth. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it by now, but 18 months ago, it was still very much in its infancy. And some very early tests that you see here, this kind of membrane, rippling kind of membrane, we saw this potential to kind of drive some of our effects. We were like, hey, that kind of looks like something we could use. So our first kind of breakthrough, if you want to go to the next slide, of these shots was this small, like miniature portal that this scientist in the show had developed. And she's putting her hand into it, as you can see, in our kind of, the way that Riley and some of the other guys had figured out using the point render to not only kind of create an effect, but also manipulate parts of the plate. So it didn't just look like we were just adding a point cloud effect over the shot. So this solution actually became really flexible, and any 2D texture could be projected onto the point cloud, no matter how complex it was, and the setup can then be shared with other artists. And you can see here how it looks in 3D space. And the advantage of using this point renderer is you can use Nuke's, traditional 2D nodes to modify the point cloud with key mixes, like, soft matte and P mats to kind of, say where this effect is going to happen. And, it was really, it looked amazing. And we developed it some more. We did some deep diving into the tool, and we got some setups going. There was a lot of trial and error, but the showrunner loved what we've done. Netflix loved it, and we kind of rolled with it. That led on to the big portal, which is just this, but bigger, the same kind of effect. There you go. And we could use this to drive all of the kind of, the distortions and the rippling effect inside this. That same tool, same method was used to kind of break our protagonist apart into like a big cloud of molecules, I guess. As she kind of runs through the wall, she kind of can control this phasing, and then she can rejoin at the end. She gets better at it as the show goes on. First episode.
You guys will totally recognize the main actress from the show right here.
So this was obviously used a lot in the show. And then again, we had to modify it to work with some of the animated geo. Create, we wanted the effect to kind of obviously work around the geo, work around the render. We also used it to create some of our own 2D elements, like the flame effects, used it to like distort the background. And then, we obviously had to do the same in reverse when the Tarask gets sucked back into his zone. Now there you can see that's what it kind of looked like in Nuke's 3D space. So yeah, and then I think the next image, Mike, is him getting sucked back. Yeah, so the whole thing had to kind of run in reverse, and in some cases had to run in slow motion. So, you know, Riley and the team really had some things to figure out with that. And then lastly, on this kind of phasing, the big thing is when our protagonist, Ava, has to walk through like 10 feet or something of solid rock. And this is a kind of reverse POV of her, what it would kind of look like with her moving through this kind of material. And I think we kind of reached the limits of what we could do with this, you know, with the point renderer and with Nuke, and we're having to use the CUDA GPU render farm to just get these things rendered in 4K. But, you know, we did it, and it was good at the start because we got to iterate very quickly on it, and Netflix wanted to try out different things, and we could turn these around in a day, and Nuke and, you know, present to them what we thought it was going to look like. And so, yeah, I mean, I was actually blown away with what we were able to kind of get out of Nuke. I think it's outstanding work from the comp team. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think it was great.
Well, you guys had a real challenge with this particular sequence as well. There's two sequences like this where she had to deliver lines, dialogue, like important dialogue, and there's actually in both of these a really like emotional moment where she has to like overcome her fears to like persevere and push through this rock surface. And we had to really sort of balance all of this crazy distortion stuff with the fact that she had to deliver emotional lines and make a connection. And so I think you guys did a really good job finding.
Yeah, and like you say, it was a lot easier to kind of, you know, clear space in 2D for her to do that, rather than it being like a pure like Houdini sim or something.
Okay, so then, you know, you've talked about, you know, all the magic and things. We have a slide in here of you know, probably one of the hardest shots, right, in the show, which is this.
Yeah, the most difficult sequence on the whole show.
Yeah.
Before Mike talks about some of our other shot work, yeah, I just wanted to mention that this was probably the most time-consuming shot on the whole show, and tracking this little red mark that you see on our arm.
Can you guys see my mouse or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we can speculate as to the reasons why the makeup department on set didn't just draw a little thin red line on our arm. However, there were no tracking markers, no features on our arm. We had our arm and torso fully rotomated in 3D. Didn't really work. We tried traditional 2D tracking, smart vectors, projecting and smart vectors, and in the end, it was a combination of all the methods that eventually got there. And I think it probably went through about 8 comp artists as well to try and nudge this thing to completion.
Well, yeah, she runs around this room, and her arm's rotating, and everything's rotating, and there's no tracking markers, and it was sticking this, whatever it is, a 3-inch red line onto her arm.
She was rotating as well, right? It was just disappearing around the back and going around.
She runs around, yeah. And then she barely moves, and so it just, you know, it was like hovering, and yeah. Anyway, so you'd be surprised on what it is that, you know, is a challenge on a visual effects-based TV show, and here it is. It's a red line. Okay, so then a couple other things about actually working on the show that I sort of wanted to go over. There's a couple other types of shots that I'll show, but one of the big things was once we started to get plates, I wanted to make sure that our reviews were sort of going to be done in the way to sort of maximize the effort and time put into the shots. And we'd found on a lot of previous projects that if you block things in and then show them in an OpenGL capture or even just a gray animated state, a lot of times it invites exploration that if you just really dial in your version, light it, render it with motion blur, do a quick comp, and put it in front of the client, a lot of times they see what it is you're trying to communicate much quicker. And so I made the decision to only really send first pass comps, but very rough, very quick, but everything was complete. And so when the showrunner saw these and Netflix saw these, they could look at it and go, wow, I can imagine this totally finished. And we did a lot less kind of versions where everyone feels like we need to explore all the choices before they kind of narrow in on something, because we presented things in a way that was what our vision for the shot was. And that also comes from our commercial work, because with commercials, they're short enough that you really need to kind of present something that the clients, who aren't usually necessarily visual effect sort of savvy customers, need to sort of be able to see this and go like, hey, I get it right away. Like, I see how you're going to sell my product, or I see how this is working. And so we took the same approach with this project, and it was very successful. Rendering at 2K, which was half res, and rendering with Redshift let us have almost finished looking stuff on version 1, which was really cool. That was a big success. Some other stuff as far as working on the show, other shot types. We had to do, wounds where a magical device was, extracted from somebody and then, put into somebody else. We had to do all 3D sort of microscope views of things where, the demon skin, the scientist lady looks through the microscope and the demon skin regrows and does all this cool stuff. We also had a bunch of some set extensions, particularly for areas that you can't go film, which, oh, there we go, like at the Vatican. So the Pope won't let you up on his balcony to film there, apparently. So we had to do a full 3D St. Peter's Square, and we had to collapse a building over here, and all the little Houdini tiny people go running out of the way, and their phone lights all turn off. So we had to do some big 3D extensions as well, which led into probably one of the other really big shots of the show, which was this time lapse. And what we needed to do was show a medieval era Rome, Vatican, transition from the 1600s all the way to modern time. And we had to sort of the shot and starts off actually zoomed in much closer to this. And we sort of see this area where a character in a flashback sequence, which was anamorphic to get a different look to it, was entombed. And what they wanted to show was over hundreds of years, the city, the Vatican was built up, and the actual basilica itself in real life was torn down, and they built a new thing, and all this change happens, and they wanted to show all this change in about 8 to 10 seconds, and then we end up in modern Rome. So we found a stock shot of the modern Vatican, which sort of showed all the different areas that we needed to show for where this entombment was going to happen. And then we had to start off with a sort of semi-accurate, medieval depiction of what that area looked like. And over time, construction happens and all the little people buzz around, and the scaffolding goes up on projected buildings from the plate. And eventually we bring all this stuff in and end up at modern day Rome. The interesting thing was, some of the artists working on this did like a big deep dive into what did the original basilica look like, what was the layout. They tried to find maps from 1600. Not that anyone was probably really going to call us on whether we nailed the layout of the Vatican from the 1600s, but we wanted to sort of avoid, somebody somewhere down the line being like, hey, the old basilica looked like, this thing here, and it did, and there's paintings of it, and now here it is in 3D. We find actually on most of our shows and on lots of our commercial work, we become, educated in subject matter that is odd. I think most of us are airplane landing gear and navigation light and markings experts, because of having worked on a variety of commercials for Cathay Pacific. So here, if you want a job at the embassy and you want to learn about aircraft landing gear or the Vatican in the 1600s, you'll come away knowing about all kinds of bizarre stuff. And so yeah, this project, we became experts on ancient Vatican layout. Let's see what else we got. And then I guess the last thing as far as working on the main show was the end of the show. we were wrapping up the show, about 100 shots in that big crunch period kind of time at the end of most shows, where the global pandemic hit and everyone had to go home. So we took the time to gear up for remote work, a secure remote work solution, and we managed to send all our artists home, transition to working remotely, and we got through the last, whatever it was, 50, 100 shots, finished them, everything was great, delivered the show on time, and it hit the market exactly at the right time. And so you can tell we're all still at home, and that's a great capability to have going into the future. You know, one day when we may all be back in the office, we now have this ability to also have people remote, and you know, it's something that's been a positive. As us finishing the show, we wrapped up Warrior Nun. Everyone had this remote setup. We started getting some commercial work because, you know, the productions for all the long form TV stuff kind of stopped all at the same time. Nobody could go to set. They didn't know what the dangers of everything were. You know, nobody really had a sense on how to do this stuff. So all the production shut down, but everybody was home watching TV. And so a lot of the advertising kicked into high gear, and the ad agencies sort of started trying to work with us, saying, well, we have this existing footage and we want to put it on a phone and put other things in it, or we want to do an all CG commercial for, you know, something else. We need an all CG cat talking, whatever it is. And so we've been busy all summer working on commercial work that is, you know, primarily all 3D with a lot of comp work. And it's been a really good sort of transition, and we've been incredibly busy over the summer. And so, you know, that's just continuing, and it's going to continue. We're still bidding more projects. We're working on more stuff. And, you know, now that we finished Warrior Nun and it's been online and, you know, many people have seen it, they've commissioned a season 2. So, you know, we're now busy starting to look at scripts and breaking down work for season 2. And, you know, we're excited to see what's next for this project. So I think that's the main part of talking about Warrior Nun. I'll come back to like a short conclusion of some thoughts, but there was one more piece of Warrior Nun that we can talk about that, you know, in general, visual effects vendors don't usually get to work on too often. And we got to work directly with Netflix's marketing team because they usually produce these things, which was the main title sequence of the show. And so I'll turn it over to Paul, who is a little bit more involved with that.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a great opportunity to kind of a nice bookend after doing all the effects to also work on the title sequence. So myself and David Casey, our creative director, kind of put together a few different ideas and pitched them to the showrunner. The boards you're seeing here, the one he actually selected, and we tried to pick a bunch of elements from the show since we were already working with those assets. The halo is obviously a very important element and throughout the whole show, and some other imagery are the frescoes that you see in the background, which were painted on the cat's cradle, which is where the nun's kind of headquarters is. And using the red mist is kind of a big reveal to show this halo. And so, yeah, we put these in boards and pitched them to the showrunner and went back and forth with Netflix. And yeah, eventually arrived at this kind of nice title sequence that you get to see at the beginning of every episode. So we have experience sort of doing commercial treatments where we have to sort of take on, you know, either the agencies or in some cases we're creatively developing the idea ourselves and sort of come up with a way to sort of sell through the idea to all the stakeholders of it. And so, Paul, you guys did a really good job. This was one of how many sort of creative ideas? I think we pitched 4 in altogether, yeah.
4. Yeah, and so, you know, the showrunner got to sort of look at all this stuff and be like, hey, that fits in really well with sort of what I want to do. And the cool thing was we managed the main title sequence a little bit more as a commercial production, independent of the shot work of the show. It was funny learning about some of the considerations for this stuff, because what is the non-skippable length that we learned? It was like 4 seconds or something.
I can't remember, but this one got in that nice sweet spot where it just shows, and before you get tired of it, it's gone, and you start the show.
If it's too long, you have to be able to skip it. If it's short enough, then they show it every time, and I think we made it in there. I can't remember, but either way, it was really cool to sort of work with Netflix and Simon on putting this together as well.
Absolutely.
I guess so. As a conclusion, do I have any more slides? I have a cool title page. I'll leave that up. So as a conclusion, you know, getting our upfront planning always pays off. You know, things changed along the way, but in general, it worked very well. You know, the proxy workflow for 4K was very important in Nuke. Our choice of renderer, Redshift out of Houdini, was important. We were in production for about 9 months on the show, and the schedule generally at the embassy, we sort of keep a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 hours. And we managed to maintain that through most of the production. We worked on a few commercials along with Warrior Nun as we worked on it, but the pacing of the artists on the show was pretty good. You know, I think there was a bit of rare overtime sort of near the end, but it was pretty smooth and nobody stayed too late. Our automation in our pipeline, I think, was super important, and we've identified that as a major thing to continue to expand and grow, because any kind of changes upstream could easily be propagated all the way through to renders without anybody opening any of the software, which I think is pretty important. And we had sort of lighting artists, each one taking a whole sequence of 20 or 30 shots, and they could sort of integrate, you know, changes of all different kinds. You know, the Trask changed, his shading changed, and we got animation changes. All that could just show up through at the end without, you know, sort of anybody having to sweat each separate shot. It was all in the same kind of lighting environment. Then I think one of the biggest things that helped us be successful was the relationship we ended up having with RDF and Simon, the showrunner, and Netflix, where our feedback loop was very short, and he was in the office very often reviewing things. We were showing them stuff that would look like final frames right out of the gate, and, you know, all of our energy and time could be put into the effects work and not, you know, and everybody who's worked in visual effects knows that, you know, a lot of times you'll spin your wheels on this one effect and it'll eat time, and in the end you'll get somewhere that is only a little bit different from where you could have been at the start. And we found that we did a lot less of that on this project than you know you sometimes do, and sometimes it's unavoidable because the clients don't know what they want and you have to show them a variety of things to find it. But on this one, we seem to find it quicker with, you know, applying all of these, you know, really talented commercial artists we have, and the working with Simon so directly. I think the team was great, and, you know, it was a great experience, and I think season 2 will be just as much fun. I think that's the bulk of what we had to say. Let me make sure here. I had more text on my my little write-up here. I was going to say that 2 more things. One is we'll try to send or make available, or you can use the Google to look up the Embassy and Warrior Nun on YouTube or Vimeo, and or go to our webpage. I think they're all there. A lot of the images you've seen are there as live breakdowns, which really shows stuff in motion, which really sort of sells how everything got put together. So, you know, please go look that stuff up. And I think the last thing that I wanted to say was that, you know, we're busy, and our team will be growing in the future, especially for season 2. And if, you know, working with us and with, you know, in our pipeline to work on projects like this, or if you want to know more about landing gear or aircraft markings or, you know, ancient Vatican or whatever, please, you know, check our website and apply. And we're looking for good people. So I think that's pretty much it. And I believe, Marina, you were going to sort of wrangle some Q&A, or somebody was. So happy to answer questions.
For sure. We have some great questions. But before did you guys need like a cheerleader in the office? Because I'm like all in. We have some really great questions, but let's start because you talked a little bit about it towards the end. What is it like to use Redshift in a production like this in comparison to RenderMan or Arnold?
So we've been in the shop of much software. I mean, we've been around since 2002, and so over time, you know, we were working in Lightwave and XSI, and we've been in Arnold for a long time. You know, we've worked in Houdini with Mantra and Redshift. So we've used pretty much most rendering softwares and most actual softwares along the way. And our experience with Redshift has been great. We started using it. I mean, we used it on Lost in Space, and we've used it in our commercial productions. And other than just knowing the few limitations of the size of geometry on the card's RAM, there hasn't been any downsides at all. You know, it's all been upsides. And compared to using Mantra, it's 4 to 5 times faster generally. And so when that was sort of the transition to working in 4K was on Lost in Space. And so what it did was it kind of had the effect of, you know, we're all used to working at 2K, and then now we're working on a 4K show. Now that we're using Redshift and it's 4 to 5 times faster, it's kind of like now we're back to working in 2K. And so, you know, the speed gains get kind of eaten up in the resolution, but it's back to sort of not having everything be, you know, quite so long to render. And it made rendering, you know, half res stuff, which is 2K, really quick. We could get through, you know, frames of this demon Trask thing, full frame stuff in like, I don't know, 8 minutes on one of these cards at 2K. And so no problem overnight. You'd come back the next day and you'd have, and this again kind of comes from our commercial work. We really want to render the entire 30 or 60-second commercial every night so that we have a full update the next day to be able to send to the clients, because the timelines are so short. So applying that same kind of pipeline idea to Warrior Nun meant that artists could launch 20 shots of the demon thing running around. It all goes off to the GPUs, and then, but with using Redshift, the next day it's all there, and we can put it together and have a look at it. So it was great using it in production, and we've been using it in production for years now. So yeah, it'll stick.
We have a couple of more questions about your pipeline. Specifically, what does that remote pipeline look like, and which version of Linux do you use? Answering sort of 2 questions there with one stone.
It's CentOS 7 Linux. So, you know, we basically just, we drives our software. You know, we're not running around in Linux too much for stuff. You know, we use it to launch other things, and that's fine. The remote pipeline, I mean, I guess that could either refer to us working remotely in COVID land, or the remote launching of automation and changes to the pipeline. And so I'll quickly speak to both, and that way, you know, hopefully we've covered it. Danielle, is what we're using for remote work top secret in any way? Does it matter?
No.
No? Okay. So yeah, we're using, when we transitioned to working remotely, there's a few different products on the market, and we tested some of them out. The difficulty was that some of them assume that you're working in a Windows environment. Some of them require hardware, which, because everyone was doing this at the same time, wasn't available. And we happen to have a bunch of HP workstations already. And so there's an HP solution, which some of the other companies in town are also using, that is really effective. It's the HP remote graphics system. And so most of us, other than the Macs, I think, are using this HP system. And it's been outstanding. It's been great. We got everybody working on these little remote boxes remotely, and it's all secure, and there's nothing at anyone's actual, you know, home locations. It's all still in the office on our computers using this HP solution. If the question was about sort of our pipeline work for propagating changes to the pipeline and having automated things get updated, all that stuff is custom software sort of written at the embassy, where it's a series of scripts that talk to a central database that maintains a list of everything that somebody's published. And so you'll do animation work, and then once it's approved, you'll publish that, and that gets updated in the database. So there's always entries for all of the shots, and every shot has an inventory list of what's supposed to go into it that we maintain. And as long as both those things are current, you can have a script say, hey, inventory, go talk to the database and find out what should be in the shot, find out what the latest versions of everything are, open up Houdini in the background, rebuild my shot with all the latest stuff, and then launch it to the render farm. So it's a series of Python work and a database, and it's all driven through the command line.
And we'll answer these last two. They're kind of related. For the Ghost, did you have to use Deep Composite, or was it necessary? Can you talk more about it? Integrations, challenges, etc.
Nick, that sounds like a you question.
No. No, we generally don't use deep compositing at the embassy. Several reasons, speed, space. They can be quite cumbersome. I worked at MPC before I came to the embassy, and everything was rendered with deeps. And yes, it's great for some stuff, but if you've worked with deeps before, you'll know that, especially if you're dealing with volumes, those things can become huge. And there was not a lot of cases where the wraith was like passing through objects from the plate, or we didn't really have to have it interact that much. Maybe the fight scene with Ava, she's kind of stabbing him, but it was an hour or two of roto hour compared to gigabytes of data and storage and slowing the comp down. So as much as they're great, and I've used them a lot in the past, we just didn't feel like it was really that necessary for the show. In terms of integration, we did have there was a little bit of look at the start where, because it's only Ava that can see this wraith, we thought, well, does this thing have interactive light? Is it lit by the environment, or is it not? Does it have its own lighting? Does it emit light? I think we ended up with it having red eyes or hollow eyes. I think we originated with. And I think we came up with a solution where it was somewhere in between, because it just looks weird if it has no environment lighting on it whatsoever. So yeah, there you go. So these guys are rimlet nicely, and we had to do it to integrate them into the scene, even though only Ava can see them.
Yeah, something interesting. If our 4K show had also been deeps, I think we would have found working in comp, very sluggish, right? And
yeah.
Yeah, and so but the one thing that's interesting about this is that because we were so involved with, as the sole vendor, with how we were receiving plates and how we were sending plates back out when they were finaled, we sort of figured out how we brought EXRs in, and we sent EXRs back out, and the EXRs that we sent out all had embedded mats, and so we didn't have to send multiple files for each final, where you're going to send the main picture and you're going to send a separate image with the mat and everything could be integrated together. So all these wraiths, because we knew that how red they were was something that they were going to dial in the color grading afterwards, everything came nicely with mats for the glowing blue stuff and all the reds for the wraiths, and they could basically then take these frames, and then if this fight in the meat we nicknamed it the meat locker. What was
you're using our nicknames for sequences.
Fighting in a butcher shop. All these sequences, there's so many sequences, we had to nickname all of them. And in fact, it makes us want to add nickname capability to our pipeline so that we could just type in the nickname, because the shot numbers became 700 shots in all these sequences, and they're all numbered the same. But if they were going to grade this all blue to make it cold and moody, they didn't want the wraith to go purple in there, so we made sure there was mats so that they could tweak that afterwards however they wanted. And because we were heavily involved in how we were delivering it, we could make sure that all the mats were just embedded in the one file, and so it was kind of nicer to work that way.
I think it was kind of the advantage overall, the production company being in Vancouver, and editorial and grading. We got to go to editorial and see first passes. We got to go to the grading and be part of that. A lot of it was us pushing and volunteering to do that, because again, we do that in our commercial world anyway. But it was largely beneficial, as opposed to, say, sometimes working on a feature film and just getting direction to execute and that's it. So more creative involvement and technical setup at the beginning as well.
Yeah, Nick and I went down and we spotted a bunch of episodes as they were doing their QC fixes, and they were of course finding microphone shadows and tape on the floor of all this stuff that wasn't visual effects shots, and most of it they could get rid of, but every now and again we'd find one more thing kind of came to us as, you know, like the shot count expanded over time as they sort of finished each episode and realized that, hey, you know, these reflections in the windows, we can't paint those out. Here's another shot for you. So yeah. But it was
Hardly any visual effects tech checks.
Yes, but the funny thing was that, you know, it kind of confirmed the level of quality that we were doing, because I think we ended up with what, a handful of visual effects kickbacks in that same process. Whereas, what's that?
They found very little from us.
They found very little, and it reassured us that the amount of time that because we were always wondering, like, man, we're really, you know, picking on some of this stuff, but it was the right stuff to pick on, because if we hadn't, we would have, the delay of getting a whole bunch of stuff right at the end as they were finishing the shows would have just been much worse than us just maintaining that kind of high quality level throughout. And then, you know, then we had room to do the tape on the floor, or the reflections, or whatever it was that, you know, came up at the end. So yeah.
And I'm curious, because it came up during the conversation, during the presentation as well, about, you know, making sure that the weapons didn't look like lightsabers. So why are they blue?
Paul, you explain
why are they blue. Yeah.
I have no explanation for that, but I don't know.
No, we know. Come on. I mean, I guess
because
Davinium's
blue.
Well, we don't want to.
I mean,
yeah. So here, where's the critter? So I mean, I guess I don't know if
I don't think we have a blue glow in here.
Well, no, I'm not sure if all the stuff we know about the show is common knowledge, and so maybe that's top secret why specifically.
Oh.
Yeah.
Basically,
the stab of the wraith has some of that glow.
Yeah, whenever the halo bearer who has this artifact in her gets close to these metallic objects made from, you know, the skin of this guy, they glow blue. And so there's a variety of swords and weapons, and
Rings.
it's sort of a theme throughout the entire show. And you know, Nick had to sort of dial in this sort of amount of, you know, they want to see it glowing blue in the sunlight, but it has to glow blue at night as well. But you can't completely wipe out any kind of reflections that were on the props, because then if you do that, it just turns into like a laser sword.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a balance to sort of get that exactly right. And then of course, same thing with the red cloudy wraith guys. We embedded mats for all the blue stuff, and that came out in the final shots. And then when they did all the color grading, they could make sure it stayed at just the right level of blue, or they could crank it up to 1,000,000, which, you know, they could do. So yeah, we had to do a variety of stuff with the blue stuff, where somebody had gunshots by the same metal, and she had glowing bullet holes, and, you know, this kind of was a theme throughout pretty much every episode. In fact, one episode we had a knife with like a rat on the end of it that somebody was cooking, and the knife had to glow blue with this, whatever it was. What was it? A dead rat?
Yeah, it was a roast rat.
Yeah,
roast rat on a Davinium knife, and so we had to cut mats around the dead rat. So there we go. I don't think it was a real dead rat.
No, not that.
No rats were hurt in the
filming of this show.
No, 0 rats.
And with that, thank you guys so much for your time today. That was fantastic. I can't wait to do this again for season 2. Get out there in the world.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you guys.
And thanks so much, Nick, Mike, Paul, and Danielle. It's been fantastic. And thank you, everybody that tuned in today. Be sure to visit the embassy's website for the videos. Unfortunately, they don't play very well through Zoom, so we decided to go with images as well, just to make it a little clearer. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another webinar. So be sure to visit sparkcg.org for updates on those. So until the next one, we'll see you all soon.